All right, so let's start with our first talk. Max, the head of design at N10, will talk about the exciting things we are working on at N10. Max, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Harshil, for the warm introduction as always. So there's been a lot in the pipeline. I'm very excited to share. I'll give a few updates on some things that are in progress, so you get a bit of a behind the scenes sneak peek. But what I'm going to start with today is the item list node that has come out that Harshil referenced. So he's going to be doing more of a deep dive. I'll just kind of give you the greatest hits on this one. But so this is the latest node that's coming out with an aim to reduce the need for JavaScript in the function node. So generally, it's great with N8N that you can fall back on JavaScript when you need to, but we want to make sure to have, for all the different types of things that you might need to use JavaScript for, to have a sort of no-code option for that. So I would say that the item list node is the first node and feature that's coming out to sort of help tackle this. But this is something that thematically over the next months, we're going to be looking at how to have more nodes and features that let you do things without having to write native code. So in a nutshell, the item list node has various helper functions or operations rather for manipulating the data that you have in your workflow. And these operations focus on the typical sort of challenges you might have right now when you're dealing with items and item and sort of channeling the great N8N pattern of being able to iterate over something without really having to do that in a node. So I think the best way to explain this is with a demo. So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of get our hands dirty. But so what I have here is a rather simple workflow to just sort of show this out. So in this example, we're pulling in a checklist from Trello. So just to contextualize that, I have, let's say, my board here. And if I open this ticket in Trello, a card can have a checklist. And then for each checklist, we have these checklist items. So if I go into my Trello node here, we're set up to pull in exactly this checklist that I have here. If I go ahead and do that, what we'll see is if we flip to the JSON view that by default, we have one item of data coming in for this checklist. And we have these check items here, which is an array with 4 items on there, matching up with these 4 here. And we can access them in here. Now, again, because N8N performs each operation per item, we would have to use a function node to sort of promote these items in this check items array to the top level so we can perform per item actions on that. So in this case, what I'm trying to do is to filter by the checklist items that are completed and the checklist items that are not completed. So again, we would usually have to use a function node to first get these items up to the top level so N8N recognizes them as an item. What we can do with the item lists node, search for it here, but you can also find it from the helpers core node section. So I'll add it to the canvas and we'll connect it here. So the way this node works is we have various operations. We could split out items, aggregate them, sort them, limit them. Harshil's going to go into some of these other operations, so I'll just sort of highlight the split out items. But so how this one works is we define a field to split out, and then it chops all those into their own top level items. So for the field to split out, if we take a look in our Trello node here, we see that the key where we have this array that we want to split out here is called check items. So if I copy that and paste it in here, when we execute this node, we now have 4 items with those 4 checklists in there. One thing you can do as well is you can include other items or other fields of data that you'd like included in this item. So in this case, if I go here, we have in this single item, various properties like the ID of the card that we might want to also carry over into these items that we have put there. So that's possible also with this node. But in this case, now that I have my 4 items, I can connect it to my if node. We go in here, the value that we're referencing, we're checking if it's either complete or incomplete. And so now when we run this workflow, we can see that we had one item that was completed, that checks out, and 3 items that didn't. And so at no point did we have to write out any JavaScript. So very excited about that. This is maybe one of the most simplest setups here. We could, of course, include other fields. So how that might look like is if we wanted to select other fields to include, we can then start adding those as we might in the set node. So in this case, what I could do is go in here, and let's say I do also want to carry along the ID of the card because that might be relevant for us. I can copy that. I can paste that key in here and then do that. And now we see that that check items is being carried through, and also that top level. One thing to keep in mind is in these fields to split out, these field names, you do want to be writing out the key itself for that JSON object and not referencing it via expression. When you start working with more complicated data structures, you can use dot notation. So if we had maybe a child element nested within check items, we could define it like that if that's the thing that we want to split out to. So there's a lot of other modes in this node, but I'll leave that to Harshil to show you how to use those. So that's the demo for the item list node. Please do check it out and use it. And as always, on our community forums, do reach out with feedback if there's certain cases that you find that aren't possible with the node, because again, this is the V1 of it, and we expect to, from your feedback, improve the node and sort of add new operations and add more options so we can cover all the world of possibilities of all the sorts of things that you're trying to transform, manipulate, map, etc. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and for the second part of my talk, I would love to give you an update on some of the things that we're working on here at N8N, and I'm very excited about a lot of these things that are in the pipeline. So one thing that I think our community's been waiting on for a while now is a Google Drive trigger and a Google Sheets trigger. So there's been some technical blockers on the hood from us to realize this. Those are now gone, and the Google Drive trigger is currently up for review. We're basically doing the polishing, final touches on that, making sure that it's all working perfectly. So that should be coming out real soon. So very excited about that. And as soon as the Google Drive trigger is out, that's going to unblock us to be able to deliver a Google Sheets trigger as well shortly after that. So I don't have a timeline on the Google Sheets trigger, but again, the same sort of technical blocker that we had for Google Drive was the case for Google Sheets. So as soon as the Google Drive trigger is out, you can expect that Google Sheets will be following soon thereafter. And I think a lot of our community members are going to be very excited about that. I know a lot of us here on the N8N team are as well. So you won't have to do that sort of custom polling method that you might have done beforehand with Google Sheets. So that's some of the nodes will be coming out. Of course, there's many others. That's just one that we're particularly excited about because that's been in the backlog for a while. Outside of that, one thing that I've been working on with some of my colleagues here at N8N is collecting a long list of UX improvements to the workflow canvas, or what's also referenced as the editor UI, so where you're basically building out the workflows. So what we've done is we've collected a lot of these things. Some are small changes, some are larger changes that we think together will all improve the UX experience for power users and for newcomers as well. And so next week, we expect to break ground on sort of the first batch of these changes. Some of the things that we'll be focusing on is making node states a bit clearer, so you know when a node's errored out or successfully executed, and then also clarifying where your data flows. So what that will likely look like is connectors, for example, highlighting in green where data has flowed through those, so it's a lot easier for you to understand what's happened in your workflow, especially as they get more complicated. There'll also be a various number of other tweaks that we might demo in a subsequent community meetup here. Other than that, we're working on the record locator component, which I'm very excited about. So right now in a lot of nodes, you just need to define an ID. Let's say in Google Drive, when you're selecting a folder, you have to go in Google Drive and figure out that folder. With a record locator component, you'll be able to traverse tree-like structures like file systems or hierarchies like board and card and checklist like in the Trello demo, and be able to just drill down, point and click, and select a record. So that's going to allow you to much more easily find and pick the things like files, folders, cards without digging around for an ID. It's also going to have a by URL mode, so you can paste in the URL, and then we, under the hood, turn that into an ID. So that'll be helpful in nodes like Airtable, where right now you have to go around and fiddle around and go find that. Lastly, user management is in progress. We get a lot of inbound requests on this very popular feature request. We're making great progress. There's a few back-end tickets left, and then basically we'll be connecting the front end and back end on that and doing a bunch of testing. So I don't have a release date for that, but this we have a big squad focused on that feature. It's one of our main priorities. And again, we're making great progress on that. In closing, we're doing a lot more user testing at NNN. If you're on Discord, you will have seen me in there asking some community members to join. It really helps us improve the product. It's also a great way to get a sneak peek behind the scenes of what we're working on. So if you are interested in helping out with some user testing, make sure to look out for messages from me on Discord. I'm going to be trying to every week getting some of our community members in there, testing some of these new features so we can make sure that they're validated by the time we implement them. And lastly, as always, a massive thanks to everyone on the team and the community who's working to push these features forward and improve NNN. I'm truly lucky to have such a great team and community to work with and collaborate with as we build out and roll out these features. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Max, for sharing this. All right, perfect. Thank you, Max, for sharing the updates. And this was wonderful. And I'm looking forward to using the trigger notes, especially because I personally have been waiting for them for a while. So it's going to be really exciting. Again, a quick reminder for you all. Now, I am collecting your questions and will be asking them after our next talk. So if you have any questions for Max, don't forget to share them in the chat. Moving forward, imagine a world where smart devices could be controlled without the internet. Let's not imagine it. Let's actually see how Jason is building smart devices using inexpensive, commonly available hardware that is managed with on-premise N10, thus eliminating the need for an internet connection to run your smart home. Jason, the floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot, Harshil. So yeah, I've been playing around, as I tend to do, with various bits of hardware and seeing what we can do with N8N when we combine them all together. It's actually started out in rather an odd way. My younger daughter was having difficulty falling asleep, and like every good nerd, I saw this as an opportunity to build something. So I pulled out one of my Raspberry Pis and hooked it up to a speaker, and had, in a couple of days, built a nice little player for her podcasts that didn't require her to actually have to set it all up. I could manage it all remotely from my phone. But she found that at night, if she fell asleep, she would have missed part of the podcast and wouldn't be able to listen to it and go back. So she asked if I could figure out a way to roll it all back. And I was digging into it and found, well, sure enough, this application has a API built into it. So I thought, great, I can control it with N8N, but I didn't want to give her a whole computer or even a phone to have to work with. So I pulled out a wonderful little device, and this is called, I don't know how well you can see this or not. So this is an ESP32 microcontroller. They're relatively inexpensive. You can find them often on places like AliExpress for between $5 and $8. And this is a full-blown computer system. It has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, it has memory, storage, you name it. It's got all kinds of abilities built into it. I thought, that's kind of fun. What can we do with that? So I actually built a little switch into it and threw in a nice little Wi-Fi connection and got it to send a request out to N8N, which then would go and it would turn on her player, or depending upon how she touched the button, it could roll it back, and then it automatically set it to turn off after an hour. I thought, well, if we can do that, what else can we do? So I started playing around and looking at this and realized, well, this is all this stuff that we're talking about with IoT. the Internet of Things. And I just built out almost by accident a couple of Internet of Things devices that did not require me to have internet connectivity. So I took the internet out of the Internet of Things. So when you have devices commonly like this, like we all, I'm sure, have one of these sitting at home, plug that you go and you plug into the side of the wall, and you fire up your phone, and you often will have a QR code on it somewhere, or there'll be an ID code on the back that you would scan with an app, and it asks you to do, create an account, give out your favorite password that you use for all your other accounts, and give them access to basically control hardware within your home. Not overly excited about random people from random countries entering my home and doing random things. So with some of the devices that I've been playing with now, you don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to flip over. I'm going to try to flip over to a different camera here. We'll see if this works or not. It's got about a 50% success rate, and so I may disappear. But with any luck, well, that's looking good. There we go. So this is my little device that's set up. It looks as scary as it actually is. But this device is now set up to completely run and control N8N. This button here gives me the ability to actually fire off an API call that N8N can pick up with the webhook. And there is, you can see a red light here, and beside it, there is a blue light that you can't see yet. And that is actually can be responded to by N8N. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you just a little workflow that I've set up that actually will run. Actually, I'm going to use this one instead. And hopefully you can see the screen. So we've got this workflow set up. Here's the webhook I promised you. And so I'm going to give you guys a bit of a challenge. If you can somehow still see my camera, where you can see my device, and keep an eye on the web or workflow that I'm sharing out, they kind of have to work together. So we'll see if this works or not. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to execute the workflow. And as you can see, it's waiting, a typical workflow that's waiting. If you can see, I'm going to touch the button. When I press the button, it's going to fire off the workflow. And now you see we've got this loop going here. I've got an on and an off loop. So if you take a look back at my camera, you will see that there's a blue button that's cycling on and off in time with the workflow. It's not that complex. It seems like a complicated thing. This was about, I'd say I put in a couple hours a day for about a week to set all this up. And it's very relatively simple to work with. So this is kind of my proof of concept. And of course, I'm never satisfied with just a proof of concept. So I've got a roadmap built out of things I want to do. So I'm going to actually change sharing my screen here. And I'm going to flip over to another screen. And on that screen, there we go. So this is the web interface that I'm actually building into that lovely little ESP32 chip that you were looking at. It's got work that needs to be done on it yet. There's still quite a bit to go, but so far I've got it set up where it'll pull up the system info. So this is, again, running from a web server built into that chip. There's no other web servers. This isn't on the internet. This is completely built into that chip. And with that web server, it will it'll do API calls out and API calls in. So you can send and receive stuff, and it's still doing it. You'll see the chip is still going back and forth. You can also see on the screen, I've got, so here's your networking info. This is all pulled in real time. So when I restart the chip, and it takes about 4 seconds for the chip to restart. It'll pull all that information in. You can then go in and modify your networking information, include changing your host name, changing your SSID, your NADN information, so you can change the address in here. You can tell it you want to go to your test or your production environment, so it will change your webhook URL. It'll add the test piece onto it automatically. And then the GPIOs. So those are all the pins on the chip so that you can talk to them. This is the piece I'm still working on, but I'm going to have the ability to be able to pick and choose any one of the pins, control it, and then give it an API endpoint. So either it will, if it's an input node, it will actually create the API endpoint automatically on the chip so that NAN can talk to it. Or if it's an output node, it will actually connect to NAN from that API. So this is a little bit I have to go yet. I also want to add in a couple more things. So for example, if the first time you boot it, it doesn't see the Wi-Fi information, it'll actually go into a host node. So it'll create its own Wi-Fi network, and you'll be able to connect to it and then do the pre-configuration, again, without any internet connectivity. And it'll be able to fire that up. And I've also got, and I don't know how well you can, it's hard to see even on the camera, this little device here. So that's actually a screen. So it's about a 2 centimeter screen. And on there is a dynamically created QR code that if you take your smartphone and you were to, of course, I don't have it queued up because why would I have it queued up? That wouldn't make any sense. And here we go. If you take your favorite barcode scanner and put it over it, it'll read the QR code. And I don't know if you can see that or not, take you straight into the web interface without even having to punch anything in. So those are the toys I've been playing around with. The things I still have plans to write all this up, and I want to make a nice little package for it. And when I do get it all done and written up, I'll make it all available on my website, and you guys will be able to pull this down and build your own if you want, and play around with it and do all kinds of fun things. Because the wonderful thing about this now is this is kind of the core, it's just the base, but I can start adding in other things, you know, like for example, I can add in a sonar so that it can detect distance and learn how to follow things. I can put in a high voltage relay, which will allow it to literally turn on any high voltage device. We can start playing around with servos. Servos will let us physically control things. So we're looking at robotic arms. We can start creating and controlling different physical devices that way. You can, you know, work with it within your home. You can turn it into with a temperature sensor, turn it into a thermostat that can control different devices, control your furnace, whichever you like. IR receiver is really good because you can actually could then take this and hijack signals from your remote control. And when you go to turn your TV on with your remote control, maybe it'll actually catch it and then with NAN turn down the lights. So there's possibilities with that. You know, we've got, you know, a flame control module, so you can control your gas fireplace. It's really quite endless as to what you can do with some of this stuff now that we've kind of got this interface out into the rest of the physical world. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to flip over to my normal camera because everybody needs to be reminded that it is Friday, and that's why I'm wearing my Friday shirt. And I'll pass it back over to you, Harshil.
Wow. Okay, I'm just still processing all the stuff that I saw, and this was amazing, Jason. Thank you for sharing it. I'm like, the possibilities are kind of endless now, and I'm sorry, folks, for asking for recommendations on TV shows and movies. I think I know what I'm gonna do this weekend. But let's move forward and move forward because I see a lot of questions coming and a lot of people are now excited about the ideas that you shared, Jason. So we have a lot of questions coming in. So let me pull up my questions over here. All right. So the first question is from John, and it's for you, Max. It's where can he get this light?
So that is a custom bespoke one-off light. The SVG logo is available on our website. So I'm sure if you were really in the mood, you could get your own one made. But noted that they're well liked. We're currently concepting some rebrands. We're likely not going to tackle the logo. If we don't, maybe Harshil, you and I have a chat about how we could maybe get a few more of these lights ordered, and this could be a sort of a treat for certain community members. Maybe we raffle it off or something. If you want light up NNN signs, let us know, because maybe we can actually do something about that.
That's wonderful. And talking about the rebranding, we have a question on how many colors did you pick?
Likely referencing the brand survey that went out. So we are right now working on potentially rebranding NNN. It's something we haven't really invested in a lot since we started out, and it's something we're now looking at as we kind of understand who we are collectively and whatnot. What I can say about that is that we're very much still in concepting phase. So nothing's locked in, everything's on the table. The two concepts that you may have seen already were very early stage ones. So we haven't locked in specific colors or concepts or anything. So thank you first off for everyone for your feedback, but it's very much still in the brainstorming room, bouncing back ideas, seeing what's right. And likely, just like we did now, getting some feedback. As those concepts are shoring up, we'll likely also be circulating some surveys and whatnot to get your fantastic opinions as well.
Awesome. And Max, you shared the workflow. So is it available on the workflows page right now?
The workflow that I just showed is not available on the workflows page. If someone did want to check it out, I can make a note and get it up there by Monday if you like. Just let me know. It is the most important thing though, if you're using the item list node, just remember that you need to enter the key name itself and not referenced by expressions.
Wonderful, thank you. And another question is, don't know where to add this, but an idea would be to impart previous execution data into the editor. So in case the incoming webhook or trigger is slow and you don't need to do the webhook and trigger value by hand.
Yeah, so we have, that's a great idea. And thankfully what I can say is that's already something that's on our concept board. So it won't be one of the immediate things we're tackling next, but we do plan to refactor the node details view. So that's the modal view when you're sort of editing a node. And as part of that, we would like to add basically to all trigger nodes, the ability to be able to save, to fetch previous execution trigger data, and also just arbitrarily paste in data, webhook data for that. So it should be a lot easier to sort of simulate and troubleshoot and be testing your workflows. And again, as that feature is being designed, we're going to be really gearing up our user tests and whatnot. So you'll have sort of more opportunity to contribute on how that ultimately looks by the time we implement it.
Awesome. And can you just repeat again the updates on the Google Trigger nodes?
Yes, sure. So a lot of the Google Trigger nodes, they've kind of been blocked for a while, but we've unblocked basically the technical challenges we had with implementing them. And the Google Drive Trigger node is currently being reviewed. So we're polishing it up, we're giving it some final tests, and hopefully it's going to be going out the door very soon. Once the Google Drive Trigger node's in place, that's going to have unblocked the ability to create the Google Sheets trigger. So the Google Sheets trigger is probably the next Google trigger that we do, just because it is so popular. But from there, it should unblock any of these other Google trigger nodes. So on that note, if you have a Google trigger node that isn't the Sheets node, do check the community forum and upvote it, because now that those are possible, we are going to be looking at those and seeing which ones are getting the most upvotes to sort of add to our backlog.
Awesome. One more question is around the user management. Can we get an update on that?
Yes, so the team's hard at work on it. We've got a few back-end tickets left. The front end for this sort of V1 features is basically done. So we'll just have to connect those parts, do a lot of testing. As you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts in a feature like that, and that should be coming out real soon. I think our engineering team would not be very happy if I gave you a hard deadline right now. Again, a lot of moving parts. We want to make sure the V1 is high quality when we roll it out. But again, it's a big priority for us, and we're making great progress on it. So I hope it's going to be out soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Jason, I have a question for you. Since what you showed today does not use internet, what do we call it? Do we call it no IoT?
Maybe it's just the Jason's network of things, JNOT.
I like that. I like that. Awesome. Moving forward, let's take a look at the item list node and learn a few tricks around that. So I am gonna start with sharing my screen. See. Wonderful. I am assuming that you all can see my screen now. So with the item list node, as Max already showed you how it works, I'm gonna go through a deeper example and gonna show you each and every operations in there. So the first example is similar to what Max showed. So in here, I love Pokemon, so I'm just making a API call to the Poke API. If I execute this, I am gonna get some information. Okay. Let's see. In the meantime, let me take a quick look at the chat. Right. Let's stop this. Reload it again. Let's try it once again. All right. So as you can see now, we are getting a lot of information like the count, the next endpoint that I should call if I want to get the further information, the previous endpoint for this, and then the result. Now, I am only interested in the result for this. So earlier it was using the function node, but with the item list node, I can specify that I want the results. And if I execute this, it just gives me the result. So the result now contains the name and the URL, and it splits them into individual items. So now over here, we have 100 items. And now if I want to process this 100 items, I can add another node, refer to these values, and that particular node is gonna iterate through all these items. So this was a small example around the item list node. The next is what if we want more information from this? So for example, if I execute this particular node, which gives me some information over here. So we have the JSON information, in the JSON object, we get the ID and we have the fields which contains the actual information. But over here, what I am interested in is get the category of all these particular JSON objects. So the first thing I do is I specify which field I want to split. So it's gonna be the categories because that's an array. So if I execute this, I get all the categories for each of these individual items. But I have the categories, but I don't know which category belongs to which particular ID or which particular object. And that's where the selected other fields or the all other field is helpful. Let's just take a look at what happens when I select all other fields. Now, if I execute this, it includes all the other fields from the previous node, as well as it gets us this particular value over here that we have extracted in this node. But as mentioned, I am just interested in getting the ID because I want to map that information in the next part of my workflow. So I'm going to select selected other fields. And over here, I have to just specify which field I want. Maybe let's just do ID for now. It's going to be a quick. If I do ID, now you can see that I have got the JSON ID as well as this. So now I have an object that I want, and then I can use it later on in my workflow. So this was the split out items operation. Now, oftentimes you may want to aggregate all this information that is coming in, right? we earlier saw that we can split out all this information. But what if we want to aggregate and bundle all this information into a single array? That's where the aggregate without merge option is really useful. So if I now execute this node, we see that we have a category array which contains again all the categories. Now, because these were all individual arrays, it's now just creating an array of arrays. All right, just taking a look over here at this again. Now, if you have made API calls and if you have taken a look at how API sends the response back, it's generally not arrays of arrays. It's simply a single array of maybe a string or an object. So to do that, what we can do now over here, I've enabled the merge list option. So what this will do is this will create a single array of all these options. So now if you're making a call to an API, or if you want to pass on a single array to a particular node, this is how you can do it without writing code. The next one is kind of really interesting because we also have seen a lot of people doing this. They want to sort the information coming in maybe in an ascending order or descending order, and they are not sure how they can do it using the function node. And that's where again the item list node is really helpful. Now over here, what I am doing is I'm again making a call to the Poke API, extracting the results, and now I am selecting the sort operation. I am sorting this based on the field name, and I want to do an ascending order, so I selected the order ascending. If I want to do descending, I'm going to select descending, execute the node, and now it does sorting for you. So again, it's just trying to help you out with not getting into the complexity of writing codes and giving you more of a visual cue of how you can do all these operations without code. And the last one is around limiting these outputs. So you get thousands of outputs from a particular node, but in your response, you only want to send maybe 10 of this incoming information. So how can you do that? So again, the earlier was to write some functions and then limit those incoming values. But now with the item list node, you can limit the number of outputs that you want. So over here, I just want 10 items from the last, right? I just want the last 10 items. That's why I selected keep the last 10 items. If we want the first 10 items, we can select first items. We can even change this. So let's just say we want only 5 items. We execute this, it returns only just 5 items, and you can then pass on this information to the next node. Now over here, you can combine all this together. So let's just say we sorted this into ascending order, and then we want to send the first 5. So you can have the sort operation, and then you can connect the item list node with the limit operation, and that's how you can move forward with this. So I hope this kind of helps you understand how item list node can be useful. Now, if you have again any feedback, or if you want to let us know what kind of operations you think should be added in this, you can always share it on the community forum, and we would be happy to take a look at it and try to add more operations to the item list node. Wonderful. So that was me talking about the item list node. Now, moving forward, it's time for our next talk. We have Daniel, who is the co-founder and CEO of Nirvana Technologies, and he's going to share with us how they use N10 to unite a user-friendly Notion Kanban board experience for the team. Now, at the same time, how the metrics are generated and represented automatically for the upper management in a BI tool. Before handing it over to Daniel, a small reminder, I am collecting your questions and will be asking them after this talk. So if you have any questions, don't forget to put them in the chat. Daniel, giving you the permission. Take it away.
Thank you, Harshil. I'm trusting everybody's hearing me well. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the N8 team. I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Yeah, so I have 5 really quick slides just to give context, and we'll go right into the workflows. So my name is Daniel Barra. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Navarra. We're a small startup based in Brazil, developing financial solutions for the electricity market. And basically, my life goes around 3 main things that are my main objectives, which is Navarra, my company. I'm also a digital nomad. I'm currently living in Costa Rica until Sunday when I'm moving to Colombia. And I also work a lot on fitness. Also, I am a person that has 2 strange attributes to be together. I am a very ambitious person, and I'm also a very lazy person. And the outcome of those 2 things, the only way they can work together is if you have really good time management, optimization. So that's why I built my system for time management. Also, I am not a developer. I'm kind of Excel savvy from working in finance, but I am not a full-time developer. So basically, I built my time management optimization system around 4 tools, which are Notion, Google Sheets, Google Calendar, and N8N. And I'm going to show a bit of the workflows that I use to do that. But first, what is a task for me? So in Notion, you can set a lot of different properties inside of an item. This is what a task is for me. So as you can see, there are a lot of things. You can have the day of the week. Oh, my workflows are in Portuguese, so I'm sorry about that. But I think it will be clear for everyone. So I have the day of the week. I have the day and time that it's actually scheduled. If it's professional or personal, I have a tag. So it could be deep work. It could be a personal task. It could be all types of things, personal or professional. If it's recurring, and how long does it take in hours? Because I really like to metrify everything that I do. And I'm going to show how I do that in a second. Okay, so where do tasks come from, and where does N8N come into this to this process? So I have 3 main sources of tasks. One of them are recurring tasks, which are things that I do every week, which is like gym, meditation, aerobics, journaling, my daily sprint with the team, answering email, all types of things that we do regularly, that I do every week. So I'm going to have tasks for that every week. The second source is Google Calendar meetings. It can be either myself scheduling with someone else or someone else scheduling with me. That could be clients, service providers, or all types of things. And non-recurring tasks, which are tasks that basically I'm talking here to you in a meeting. I have a follow-up with you. I'll just write them down and allocate them to a specific time, maybe later or maybe on the spot. So that could be book my ticket to Colombia. That could be review marketing's new article, or all sorts of things. So let's get into it. My Notion dashboard is basically allocated between to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and until Sunday. I've configured it so that I only see what is in my current week. I can also change to see other weeks, but it's configured so that I only see the task from the current week. And basically, I have among those properties a done or discarded. So for example, I've done my training session today. I'll just come here and finalize it. I've done journaling. I've done my aerobics. I'm currently in the N8 meeting. So basically, in a month, I'll have around 400 cards like these. So creating them from zero with all those properties is a lot of work. And that's where N8N comes in. So I spoke a bit about recurring tasks. So I'm going to show that first. And for that, I use Google Sheets as my backend. I use a lot of that since I don't know how to code. And I'm going to show you the workflow that I use for that. So basically, I have a spreadsheet. Oh, sorry, wrong one. I have a spreadsheet with all the tasks, and they have Google Sheets formulas where I just change the date of the beginning of the week. It will update all of the dates so that I can have it correctly for that specific week. once I have done that process, which really doesn't change a lot from week to week, I might add one thing or reduce one thing. I will use a very, very simple workflow just to read the information on Google Sheets and insert it into my Notion database. Since I have the time as well, and I sort it by time, it already comes in the order that I'm going to do them. So that helps me a lot. And the second part is the Google Calendar meetings that show up. So for that, I have a different workflow, which is a bit more complex, maybe more complex than it needed to be. But basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of doing a polling here. I'm every minute checking and getting all of my events in my calendar, checking if there's anything new from the last time that we ran it. Then I'm going to calculate the beginning and the end, how long it takes, and all sorts of things. Most of these date and times are just date conversions. I will check on this function node which day of the week it is. And then depending on which day it is, I'll use the if statements to place it on the correct place. So I'm gonna do a quick example here. Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick example just to show you like test one. And while we iterate, I hit the 1 minute cron, I'm gonna show you something else. So at the end of the day, what I do is I have a workflow that every minute or so is going to take some of my databases from Notion and is going to place it into a Google Sheets. That is this dashboard here. Just a second, I need to change this. So basically, it is just going to throw every data from those databases here. So this is my database that I was showing, like, which is my time management system, like my Kanban board. It's going to throw it here. I'm going to do a few calculations in my back end. And it's going to show up here. So basically, I can, without any work, like the only work I have is finalizing the task when it's done or discarding it in case I know I'm not going to do it at all. So like maybe I had to like drink enough water for today and I didn't do it. So I have to, it's not something that I can reallocate. So I'm just going to discard it. And it's going to calculate for me for each tag that I have, how much was my target and how much I actually did, how much I did in total. I can change this to be just recurring or just professional or just one tag. And I kind of calculate a few metrics for myself based on that. I do pretty much the same thing for fitness. This for sure could be done with a Postgres database or an SQL database that could be on a BI tool. That's what we do for like company things. But since this was personal, I just preferred to have it in an easier solution. So let's go back here. And the test that we have is here. It was allocated for 4:45 local time in Costa Rica. It has already put it to Friday because it detected that was on a Friday. Since it's a meeting in my business calendar, it's gonna throw it to professional. It's gonna have the tag meeting. And since I only booked half an hour, it's gonna put here 0.5. So that's pretty much an overall of my time management system. I wanted to make it into a way that it had almost no work, but that at the same time, it would generate automated metrics. So that's pretty much how I follow my schedule and that I can seek to reach my ambitious goals without working too hard. Hope you guys liked it. And I'll pass it back to Harshil.
Oh, Daniel, thank you so much for sharing that. We have some questions coming in, but once again, thank you for sharing that. And I have a question before I jump into all the other questions. How are you managing this, without N8N? And what was your process before that?
So before N8N, I actually did this on Trello, and it was a crazy process. So I actually did it I would take like what I did in the day, and every end of day I would put it on a spreadsheet with a KPI spreadsheet that I would manually input it. So of course it was terrible data and it was a lot of work. And yeah, I mostly moved it on I did it on a Trello board. I didn't like complete a task. I just, for example, meditation, I would have it on Monday. Once I did it on Monday, I would put it on Tuesday. So it wasn't very efficient. And it gave me a lot of work for way worse results than I have right now.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And people are asking, if there are any resources or template about this setup. So if someone wants to, try it out for their own use case, where can they find it?
Yeah, I'm working right now to try to get it to be set up for anyone to use. Right now, the way I did it in Notion is kind of like you have to have made it to understand it. But I'm working on restructuring it. So we might have it soon. As soon as I have it, I'll share it with you and you can feel free to share it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And there are a couple of questions, I think, for me, but let me check. Right. Okay. So thank you, Daniel, once again. There are a couple of questions for me, so I'm going to address them now. So there's a question around how hard would it be to structure data flows between nodes based on a specific schema? That's a really interesting question. And like you can create your own schema, but it needs to still follow the anytime structure. So it should be an array which should contain JSON objects, basically should have the JSON keyword. So if you can do that, that's how you can, then specify your own schema. If that answers your question, because currently it's not possible without specifying that. And I see another question. It says, for the item list that I showed, that some categories are duplicated, and maybe add an option to remove them and make them unique. Yeah, so I didn't show the remove duplicate functionality, but we do have that. So there is an operation that says remove duplicate. So if you select that and if you execute it, it's going to remove all the duplicate entries from that item. All right. I'm going to wait for 2 more minutes so that other people can ask their questions. But while we do that, I'm going to talk a bit about the the icebreaker that we are going to have today. So now Zoom has this amazing feature that's called breakout rooms. So we will use these breakout rooms to meet fellow community members and network with them. So these rooms are going to be generated automatically, and you will be assigned randomly. So I am not going to do any kind of cheating. Trust me on this. And once the rooms are created, Zoom will ask you to join that breakout room. So there will be a pop-up window on your screen. So make sure that you click on join this room. And we will have 2 rounds, which will be each of 5 minutes. So for every round, I'm going to share some questions so that, if you are a bit shy like me, you can get started with, talking around those questions and get to know other community members.